Who the Wild Things Are with Ryan McGuire.
You gotta listen to your body.
Oh my God, maybe, I could get out there, I could do this.
Let's take a ride, find your wild side, real stories, see with your own eyes.
It's so beautiful.
I'm gonna have the best time out here.
I was in tears. I was just like, that's the best, man.
Welcome back to Who the Wild Things Are. My name is Ryan McGuire, and I'm here to bring you conversations with the most wild folks on the planet. If you're enjoying the podcast, please leave us a rating and review on your podcast platform of choice. And if you enjoyed the episode, share it with a friend. Appreciate you guys. Let's get it going.
I was having a conversation with a really young guy, young being like early 20s, and he was trying to date, and he was like, well, what would you look for in someone you date? And I was like, if I had to go back, and I would have ended up in the same place, but I think what I would have started with was obviously need to be attracted to the person, but talking about evolution and if they believe in like the evolution of a person over time.
Right.
That they're going to begin to like different things, what happens when they start to like different things. Are they pushing themselves to grow? And depending on who you are, like I'm a growth-oriented person. If Alex wasn't the same, that becomes difficult over time, right? When you're talking decades. Because especially when you're getting into a relationship in your 20s, 30s, by the time you're 50, dude, you might be a completely different person.
Right. I don't think like 17-year-old Ty Morris knew that he was going to be running Leadville 100.
1,000%, dude. That's like an example. I always give this funny example of like if you had told me when I was 12 that I would play high school basketball, play D1 basketball, go play in Europe, come back, move to Chicago with my wife, then move to Denver with my wife, start in finance, go to real estate, leave real estate, come back to venture, move to Denver, get into endurance racing, run the Leadville one, like there's no way to plot that out on a 10-year plan.
Sure.
You're just kind of growing. And so if you're going to do that simultaneously with someone, it becomes very important, almost the most important, that you have foundational values that you share, of course, but that you're also willing to expand alongside one another. Because otherwise, the gap that can grow can be quite large. And I've seen that as well.
I love how we just kind of popped into this, but I want to hear, I want to take it back a step. The story that, and the reason I keep reaching out to you and feel it's so important for everyone to hear about your Leadville story is because of exactly what you said, how this shit came out of nowhere. Like I've known you for a couple years now.
Yep.
You're not an ultra runner.
No.
You have never even said before this year anything about ultra running, and then went from the busiest guy working in venture capital that I know on an airplane every day, so busy to the point that like you have to sneak workouts in, to dedicating all this time to ultra running. So kudos to you and your wife on figuring that
big kudos
situation
to her,
out.
for sure, dude.
But before we get into the training for Leadville, one question I have is, how did your background in being an ultra competitive basketball player feed into, help or hurt, feed into the habits, the success, the things that you created throughout your ultra training?
Yeah, good question. And I'll start by saying, like, I want to hear your story too. So when you see opportunities to tie yours in, please do so. Because I want to hear, we haven't had a chance to like properly catch up after that mayhem that went on up there. And so I want to hear what happened for you, because I know you had a bit of a roller coaster towards the end of the race as well. As you said, man, like no formal background as a runner, no formal training as an endurance athlete, really started from ground zero relative to almost everything. In training, nutrition prep, body maintenance from like a recovery standpoint. And I went into it with the expectation that honestly my body was going to break down. And the reason that I say that is before I actually got to the race, and I haven't told anybody that, but I thought there was a 30 to 40% chance that I wouldn't get to the race healthy, healthy enough to run. Because when I've had so many injuries playing basketball. I've had 4 knee surgeries, 2 ACL reconstructions. Of those 4 surgeries, 2 were ACLs, 2 ankle reconstructions, and just miles, dude. I've shot a lot of bullets, metaphorically, like on my legs, and so I don't have a ton left in the clip. So putting that sort of mileage on my legs weekly, I felt like, particularly on pavement, because that's how I had to do it from time management. I couldn't always get to the mountains to run on trails. I was like, dude, fuck, like there's a chance that I don't get here. And yet I can't go into it with that mindset. You can't like half step. You got to go all the way in. And which was easy for me, but I always had that in the background. Now, given that I had no experience, it was such a refreshing place to be as an athlete. Because playing at the level that I did with basketball, there's not a ton of stuff that I haven't experienced in the weight room. I've had plyo training. I've had heavy Olympic lift training. That's what we used to do in college. Like, so the stuff that we would get into together, I've had previous coaches before. I have some baseline knowledge about it, maybe some bad habits. And so, number one, it wasn't exciting because it wasn't truly novel. And number two, I probably had preconceived notions about the way I needed to be doing things. And in this case, with running, I was completely a blank slate. And the way that I wanted to approach it was pick the best guy that I knew and had interacted with, which was Don.
Don Reichow.
Yeah, Don
He's been on the pod twice.
Yeah, I mean, just a complete savage. But when you talk to him, so unassuming and humble, and you would never guess that he's achieved the things that he has as an endurance athlete. And a pleasure to be around, and a fantastic coach.
So cool.
Unbelievable. But I picked him because I said, well, I'm super coachable. I think it's one of my skill sets because you learn that over sports. Like if you're going to be successful and you're not always by far and away the best player on the team, you have to be able to take instruction and play within the confines of a group.
Sure.
And in order to do that, you have to be willing to take instruction pretty well. Take it well and implement it and execute it well, because otherwise you're just not going to survive. You're not going to get minutes. You're not going to play. So that skill is something I developed over time. So when I worked with Don, it was like there was no negotiating on anything that he told me. I was like, this is what you want me to eat. This is what you want me to run. These are the miles that I'm running. This is the pace that I'm running. But I'm not negotiating with you about it.
I have a saying for that. It's called "as it's written."
Yeah.
And it's like when you have a coach.
I love that.
And you're halfway through the workout, and you're like, I'll do 7 reps instead of 10 because today was hard and I didn't sleep that well. And then you just remind yourself, as it's written.
Yeah.
Just as it's written.
And it sounds intense and hardcore at the beginning. But what I find, and I don't know if you find this in your training, that it takes the mental gymnastics out of it for me. And it makes it almost easier over time. Because then it's just about execution. There's no like creative energy is taken from me. There's no other energy is taken from me other than the physical energy it takes to go and execute on what was written. Yeah. Which I find easy and amazingly powerful when trying to achieve a goal.
I will say I think it's easier to have that mentality when you have a coach programming and you're not programming for yourself.
Correct.
I will more likely adapt a workout, a week, a rep. If it's something that I wrote, I programmed. If a coach wrote it for me, it has this sacredness because it came from my coach.
Dude.
And I don't change what my coach put because in my head they're like revered. They know better. They know how to get to where I want to be. And so it's like when it's coming from a coach, it's much easier to just be like, yeah, these last 3 reps might not be good, but as it's written, we're doing the reps and then that's going to be that.
It's so well said. And what I would add to that is if people are on the fence of getting a coach, to me, what you just described is 90% of the value of the coach.
Sure.
Truly, it's an accountability partner that keeps you out of your own way on progress. And sure, there's some level of like intimate expertise that they're going to have based on their personal experience that they can share that you're not going to be able to read online. But the fact is, with the way information can be shared today, the information that they're giving you is less and less valuable over time. It's more about the implementation of that, and part of that is just being an accountability partner, writing it, checking in on you. How do we feel? I think it's just an amazing tool. So I'm trying to paint the whole picture of how I got to where I was to running Leadville the way I did, because the undertone that I hope that people take away from this is like, I'm not like special endurance athlete, and I had no experience doing it. And that's both kind of empowering for people to take away, but it's also kind of scary because Alex Hormozy has this thought that he shared with Chris Williamson on their podcast together, which I love. And it's like, as soon as you tell people that what you got was through hard work or what you got was through process, then it removes this ability for them to make excuses for their inability to do things.
Right.
Because it's easy when you look at somebody and say like, oh, that guy's a sick athlete. Like, only if I had. Well, most of the time, unless you're LeBron James or someone that's just completely gifted physically, a lot of these people really over time and compound interest have just built processes and work ethic that have gotten them to where they are, and a couple of breaks and lucks and things like that. But we can keep ourselves off the hook for so long if we kind of give people too much credit. And I don't want people to give me too much credit for what I did. It was truly like finding a coach, knowing that I had zero experience, having a beginner's mindset, being completely coachable, and then working the process without negotiation. And what was interesting about that, and by the way, what's a really important quality of a coach is being able to recalibrate periodically throughout the training block. So when I started with Don, he went into it as most people thought he would, which was, Ty has no experience running. I'm going to treat him as such. I don't know what his fitness level is, what his ability to take punishment is related to training, how much recovery he's going to need. And so when we started the discussion, I was like, I just want to finish. That was the goal.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, you never run longer than a half marathon. The half marathon was 10 years ago. You do some aerobic training and distance running, somewhere between 20, 25 miles a week, potentially. That's not anything like what we'll get into. So let's see how it goes. So we started to build and build and build. And I think the first 2.5 month check-in came, and he was like, okay, like, I think if we keep on this, you'll finish no problem. Maybe stretch goal is 29, 28 hours, but let's just keep working. And then 5 months in, he was like, interesting. Like, you're progressing better than I thought. I think you should aim for like a 29-hour finish. Maybe we're touching 26 hours on the good end. Then we were 2 months out. We had a team call, and he said, guys, he's going to push for 25 hours, which will be a super stretch goal, and he's going to have to be sprinting on the last 12-mile run with you, Joey, so I want you at the end from a pacer standpoint. So he'll finish somewhere between 25 and 27 hours. By the time we started the race, the best case, mid case, and worst case scenario were 23, 24, and 25 hours. But again, that had nothing to do with my starting athleticism. It was just how I worked the process and how my body developed over time.
Right. And
then what happens, I think, if we're just bringing this all together on how I was able to put a performance, lucky enough to put a performance together like I did for me in Leadville, was believing in the work that had been done. Sometimes it's easy to like put in, sometimes I've found it very easy to put in the work in the dark and get in my head and make progress. But then when the lights are on, struggle to like believe that I'm ready for the thing that I'm getting ready to do. So there were a lot of times when I was a younger basketball player where that would happen, where I would have put in the shots, I would have shot well, I would have put in the drills, my skill set was ready for the game, and then there was something happening when I checked into the game where I got either in my own head, my own way, I was nervous, I didn't believe in myself. So there's a big component of that when I got to the starting line, was kind of releasing expectations in a way, but also being confident that as things unfolded during the race that didn't go my way, not to freak out about them, because I believed in the product of the work ethic that I had put in to that date, which I think is really, really important.
When you think about So before we even get into the race itself, I saw this kind of transpire just following on social media and talking to you. So my year kind of goes in ebbs and flows. I'm training for a lot of different things.
Yeah.
High rocks, mountain efforts, hunting, ultras. You were like, fuck everything else. I'm running level 100 and I'm going to be laser focused. And you put in, what was it, 6 months, 5 months?
9 months.
9 months of a training block
Mm-hmm.
for a single event. Now, inside of that, like a lot of people will talk about, you know, event fatigue, where you're just thinking about something for so long. How did you battle through and get that 14-mile long run done at 5 a.m. every week, week in, week out? Like, how did you battle the burnout, the fatigue of the monotony?
Well, it came. I mean, there are moments where there are plenty of moments where I didn't want to run, and there was plenty of moments where I felt like I was burning out. So
So take yourself to that moment right there. What's going through your mind when it's you didn't sleep enough, it's 5 a.m. and you don't want to run? What did you say to yourself to get yourself to tie the shoes?
Well, it's just a simple concept that we always used to say in basketball, which was like, it's going to suck now or suck later. And it's better to pick the suck now. Because the suck later, which in basketball terms was like, you want the pain in practice. Because the stakes are low. You don't want the pain when the stakes are high. You want to be clear-headed. You want to be better conditioned. You want to be calm. You want to be strong when the stakes are really high. And so all I kept pushing was like, I want to do the best I can possibly do at that race. And in order for me to do that, I need to do this fucking run today. I don't want to do the run. But I know if I compromise this run today, it's just another chip off that rock when the race day comes. And I don't want to look back and say, damn. Like, you know, those 2 or 3 Saturdays in a row where I didn't run those 20-mile runs? Now I'm at mile 68, and I wish I would have, because this pain is a different type of pain. So I kept trying to put myself in this fictitious but probably more real place than I even understood of what it was going to feel like at mile 68, at mile 72. And what are you going to be saying to yourself then? And it's better to say it now.
Are you meditating? Are you visualizing? Are you just saying it when you're getting out of bed? What mode do you use to get to these thoughts and stay? Because sure, I have badass thoughts like what you just described. I want to do this right now so that I can dominate on race day. And then some days I'm like, nope, screw that. I don't care about any of this. X, Y, or Z is more important, or X, Y, or Z is a great reason why I shouldn't do this.
Yeah.
But for me, it often takes some modality, whether it's a meditation or sauna session or some kind of quiet place to remind myself and recenter. Do you use any of that, or are you just reflecting as you're going through life?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I would find is this, well, depending on who you ask, is a superpower not a superpower. When I decide to do something, I think I have an elite level of focus related to my ability to tune out the rest of the world.
I think that's true. So
when I decided and made the earnest decision that this is what I was doing, everything else fell away. Now, my work and my family stayed. And the reason that I was running at 4 or 5 a.m. because I tried not to put as much weight on them, my family in particular, because of a selfish decision I made to run this race. It wasn't their choice. It was my choice. Now, there were days where I would run 25 miles in the morning at 4 a.m. and I would not be my best self for the rest of the day.
Sure.
And that was hard because my wife had to pick up that burden, and it was at certain moments hard on her, and so grateful that she was there to support me. But outside of me just saying I need to run earlier and not later because of those facts, to me it was like, you made this choice, we're going to do it. And there's no, when I personally get into that mode, there's not a lot that stands in my way, even my own self-talk. Like I can push through a lot of like emotional and mental and physical pain, thus my injuries, which a lot of it was just like overtraining, quite frankly, in hindsight. But there's just something that clicks for me when that decision is made, and I just don't negotiate with myself on something that I choose to care about that much. And the other thing is too, to your point about having a coach, is like when Don was writing those things and he was now invested in me, then it was like, I don't want to let him down.
That's helpful.
You know, that's on the days where you don't want to do it. That's where those people come into play.
Sure.
Yeah. It's not the good days. The good days, you don't need them. It's the bad days. I think about this too. And if I'm meeting you and I know Ryan's going to be at the gym at 5 a.m. and I don't want to get up, there's a better chance I'm going to get up if I know you're going to be driving 20 minutes to meet me at the gym at 5 a.m. I don't want to let you down.
Sure.
Right. So that was also pretty powerful for me.
Okay. So now we get to race day,
Yeah.
4 a.m. start time, notorious Leadville downtown. Energies in the air. What's going through your mind before you? Because this is your first ultra marathon, right? This isn't just.
I had run a 50-mile training.
In training, you ran Leadville 50.
Yeah.
And so this is your first 100, but your second ultra marathon.
Correct.
What did you feel in the 50? Were you like, I feel really good, this is going to go well?
Yeah, I mean, so I knew we wanted to finish sub 10 hours because we wanted to be in that kind of 10 to 12 hour for the halfway point at the 100.
In order to hit 24 hours.
Correct.
For.
So I knew I wanted to be in that 10-hour mark. But the night before, I had a conversation with Don, and he was like, I think you can run sub 9. First time I had ever heard it. So I was like, well, shit. Like, let's go out and just see how we do. And I was so grateful for the experience of the 50 because I made a huge mistake at mile 35 with my nutrition. Halfway through, I was running like an 8:15-ish race. And then at mile 35, I stopped drinking because the electrolyte mix that I had was too heavy. It was too salty, and I didn't want it anymore.
Yeah,
and
your stomach was saying no.
Correct. And then when I stopped drinking, I stopped taking gels. And so the nutrition from mile 35 to 40 was completely, well, quite frankly, it was like virtually nothing in hindsight. And then my legs blew up at mile 40 and just didn't have any power on the uphills. And up until that point, I had never felt like that in any physical, I mean, you're nodding your head because I know you know the feeling I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I've never tried to perform and not been able to perform, not because of leg fatigue, but just like not having the nutrition in my body to even move my legs.
Yeah, you're bonking
Completely. And so that was such a valuable, I ended up finishing like 9:15, which was still a solid time, but it was such a valuable takeaway for the 100. Because going into that race, I knew I was like, okay, this is, and up until the end of the race, I executed perfectly. I never felt that feeling until the very end of the 100. I mean, I was at mile 76 and felt way better than I felt at mile 35 in the 50.
Yep.
Because of the lesson that I learned around the nutrition.
The 100-mile buffet.
The 100-mile buffet, dude.
That's it. You just got to
Yeah, and I want to hear about how you fueled. But for me, I found this brand called Carbs Fuel. It was 200 calories a pack and about 45 grams of carbohydrates. And I tried to take 2 of those an hour.
Okay.
For the entire race, along with some like Carbs Fuel gel from Never Second and some other things. But my stomach felt fine the majority of the race. And I felt very lucky for that until I got to mile 76 and there were some other things that went on. But I would say if I had to go back to the training when you say we're preparing as a non-runner for this endurance world, I would have started training my nutrition day one the same way I was training my endurance capacity day one.
Yeah, I hear that a lot too. That's a common thread, is that like I should have trained calories the same way I would during a race. And I honestly, I think about that too, but then I don't do it. And I've ran a lot of ultras now. I don't know.
It's hard. How did you fuel during the race? What was your game plan and how did you execute?
Well, I learned a valuable lesson in Alula in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, I remember this trip. We saw each other in the airport right before that.
Oh yeah, that's true. We met at the, what's that little joint called?
Mercantile.
Yeah. Yeah, went over there and took in way too much fructose in comparison. Okay, so there's like two types of sugar, fructose and glucose. So you can think about one carb source being the fruits, and you can think about the other carb source being like more starchy stuff, oats, bread, stuff like that. Ideally, one of them is getting processed by the liver, and I think the other is processed by the stomach, and that's where the glycogen stores, where the sugar is stored. So ideally you want to have, and I'm not a scientist, so take this all with a grain of salt, you can look it up, but you want to have roughly 1-to-1 or a 2-to-1 ratio having both types of sugar. I took in basically just fruit because at that point I was like, I pretty much in a normal day try to do no processed food. So I only do meat, veggies, fruit. And we were over in Alula, so it was kind of hard to get food. You had to go to like these local marts, and like all these ultra runners, like literally the world's premier ultra runners, like taking buses into town trying to get like, you know, bread and honey and like these little different types of local breads. And I ended up just taking in way too much fructose and started puking in my mouth at like lap 3, which was like, I don't know, only like 20 miles into the race, which is not good in an 8-hour race. You got a long way to go. So that was a good lesson, similar to yours probably. It was like, okay, I need to have a better mix. Yeah. So I went with Spring Energy for a lot of them. They're kind of under fire because people found out that they're actually less calories than they claimed. But the number of calories isn't what matters to me. The fact that they have the rice and the applesauce mixed into one is what's important, because you're getting those two forms of sugar.
Right.
So Spring Energy was a big one. I went super light. I don't know. I feel like you went pretty lightweight as well. I did just a belt and just drank from rivers and just, super lightweight, couple springs. I'd try to smash real food, so like beef and burgers and stuff like that at aid stations. The only big mistake I made in terms of fueling was, and I've done this twice now in different hundreds, was taking in too much tailwind too early in the race. Because, and this is that thing you were talking about, I try to do my bigger runs with similar nutrition to what I want to do during the race. But my bigger runs, maybe I'll do 2 to 4 flasks total of tailwind. Yeah. You need 10 times that during a race in terms of during a 100-mile in terms of calories and water. And so I had tailwind right before bed, tailwind when I woke up on the car ride over, double tailwinds to start, drank them both by mile 9, and then just had explosive diarrhea because I had taken in twice as much tailwind as I had taken in on any of my long runs. Right. And so you have to remember that just because something worked in a training run doesn't mean it's going to work when you double, triple, quadruple the amount of whatever that thing is. I think
it's a really good point.
So you have to keep in mind, you can't be like, oh, this gel worked really well. I had one of them on a 10-mile run. It's like, well, sure. Have you ever seen what your stomach does when you eat 19 of those?
Right.
Because that's a big difference. And yeah, the thing that I was able to mentally and physically be steadfast on was the Spring Energy gels, and those are probably the reason I got through it. I had a lot of stomach stuff going on leading up to it. I had Giardia and was basically bedridden for like the 2 months.
I remember that
leading up
was
to
that was the Leadville training camp weekend you had Giardia?
That was the weekend it got really bad. I was supposed to meet you guys to go do a double Hopes Pass, and I was at Twin Lakes camping with my family.
Yep.
On the way up there, I was throwing up out of the car window. And then basically when we got to camp, like I couldn't even set up. I just laid in the tent for 3 days while everyone camped out and was supposed to meet you guys, couldn't. And then from that point on, I lost 15 pounds. I got down to 168 pounds at 6'2".
Oh my gosh, dude. I didn't know all this.
Yeah, it was brutal. I couldn't eat. I had like malaise and just like, I wasn't depressed, but I just like couldn't really do anything. Couldn't train. Couldn't like, do the dishes. Like I just was like a blob. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to pull out of Leadville, but just to make sure, I'm going to go run the Collegiate West, which is like an 80-mile, probably like 20K of gain. Really beautiful area. I also just needed like a reset. I was fast packing it. So I was going out, sleeping on the ground, doing that whole thing, 40 miles a day, and ended up doing pretty well despite my stomach on that. And I was like, okay, if I can do 80 miles and 20K of vert fast packing, I should be able to do Leadville and finish without, an issue. It's not going to be a great race, but I at least owe it to the fundraising people and all the people planning on coming. Everyone had made all these big plans. I'm like, I at least owe it to them to toe the line. So yeah, that was my lead up into Leadville.
And tell me about, so how did you feel on race day?
I had so much fun. I'll plug it, I guess, real quick because Jacob's downstairs. Jacob lives with me. Mm-hmm. He runs a club called Aeon, and part of that is media. So he recorded the entire thing, and they're dropping we're dropping a documentary this Sunday, which will be sick. Like, he's got the touch. Like, he's gifted for that. And makes me look a lot cooler than I am.
I love it.
And a lot dumber than I am. There's some stuff I say like 80 miles in that's just ridiculous.
Yeah. All of us were kind of out of body, I think, at that point. No brain cells left.
Yep. But the interesting thing was I felt otherworldly happy. It was so weird. I was so sick that it was hard for me to feel joy for like that 6 weeks leading up.
Yeah.
And then I think because so what was happening is I was eating a ton of food and my body was, despite eating all that food, it wasn't absorbing anything. So like a lot of weird things were happening. I was losing tons of weight. My face was like sucked in. But then on race day, I was just so happy to be there and I had no expectations.
Right.
And I was just like, I'm just going to go run through the woods and have a good time. And so for the first 70 miles, I just was laughing and running around, having a great time. And obviously those last 30 miles of 100, I knew they were going to get dark. I foreshadow it even at mile 20. I'm like, we're just playing around. It's going to get nasty later. And obviously it did. And then I started bleeding internally and still dealing with that now.
Really?
Yeah, I actually, full disclosure, almost called you this morning because I was like, I've been in bed all day just like battling. And it's not intense. It's just dull. Like when you have internal bleeding and like this stomach stuff, it's so hard to put your finger on it. It's not like an ankle where it's like, ow, it hurts when I do this. It's just like the most random things set it off. Like you'll drink a weird electrolyte. And because I have ulcers and bleeding, it like reacts weird. And then you're just like done for like 2 days.
Oh,
and
dude.
you just, yeah. So
it's brutal. How does that happen? How did they say that those develop?
I think it was a combination of things. I think it was partially because I had untreated giardia. I think the main thing that happened was I had an amazing crew that did everything I asked for, and I asked for a lot of Advil at the end of the race, and I got it. And I think that played a big part of it.
Yep.
I was also taking caffeine pills and salt pills. So
yeah, I was doing the same.
Just, those pill cocktails mixed with giardia, mixed with stress, and whatever was underlying in here. I don't know if I had some kind of ulcer beforehand that I was going into the race with. I treat my body pretty rigorously. So it's hard to exactly put your finger on it. But yeah, when I went to the hospital afterwards, they sent me home, and then I passed out in that bathroom and took me back to the hospital, and they said I had to have emergency blood transfusion, that I like could die. My mom was crying. Everything was crazy. And they transferred me to another hospital, like into the ICU. And then they were like, yo, our bad. Like, basically there's different blood count numbers. The platelets were what they were concerned about. They're typically at like 200,000. Mine was at 28. And they're like,
28 like flat?
yeah, like it was like 5% of what it had been.
Oh my gosh.
And then, so that's why they had thought that. And the weird thing about it was, I've always thought I was going to die at 28. And this is like 6 days before my 29th birthday.
Wait, huh?
My entire life, I've told my mom when I was a kid, I don't know where it came from. And I was like, I always thought I was going to die at 28. I'm like 28 and 360 days at this point. And I'm like, this is how it goes. Nurse walks in. I recognized her. And I was like, do I know you? She's like, no. I'm like, I know you. She's like, no, you don't. I'm like, holy shit, this is it. And I was like, this is it. And then randomly, I'm like very out of it, laying in the hospital bed. And the other doctor runs in and she goes, the test was wrong. We just redid your results. Like, your blood scores are fine. You're going to be okay. And I'm like,
oh my gosh. I'm getting chills.
yeah, it was a roller coaster for sure.
Wow. I'm sure for your mom too.
Yeah, she was not
What?
happy. Yeah.
Well, I'm thankful that you're wrong.
Yeah. Yeah,
At
me
least
too.
about the
I was stoked
20
about that.
Yeah, that's
stoked about that. I'm
pumped.
29.
Yeah, I'm pumped that you're at 29, still going. But bummed to hear that you're still dealing with some of that stuff.
And I'll never understand why I recognize the nurse. I recognized her like I recognized my first cousin. Like, I know her face so well. I could pick her out of a crowd right now, and I've known her for a while. And she's like, do we go to the same gym? Or like, you live in Littleton? I'm like, I do live in Littleton. Like, somehow you and I know each other. And maybe we do. Maybe she's my, like a distant friend's girlfriend, and we've been at the same place several times. But I'm like, 100% I know her.
Yeah, you
And
recognize her.
I asked everybody else.
What a trippy experience.
So trippy, dude.
Oh, dude.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the whole time you're like, when you're having a near-death experience, you're kind of just like out of it a little bit.
Yep.
Because your blood levels are low, super suppressed. So like you're just lethargic, and you're not sure like when you're dreaming and when you're awake. And yeah, you just can't really tell which way is up sometimes. So it was very, very
and
interesting
particularly off the
experience.
heels of running the race. I mean, you get to the end of that race, you're healthy, you're still feeling like you're hallucinating in some sort of way.
For sure.
I mean, it was a clear 24 hours post race before I felt like my nervous system was kind of out of whack for a month. But that first 24 hours was wacky. It felt like I was like at a rave and had been up for 48, 72 hours.
Right.
Partying. Like, that's how my body felt. Like, almost like you had missed a couple sleep cycles and you're forcing yourself to stay awake, even though it had only been like 24.
Right.
It just was a really weird, to me, it wasn't even the physical rebound that was the toughest part. To me, it's been the hormonal and the like the CNS rebound that's been the toughest. And
Tell me about that a little bit.
24 hours is rough.
What were specific symptoms that you noticed post race outside of like muscle soreness?
Yeah, post race, I didn't eat for like 4 days.
Really?
Yeah. I didn't have an appetite to eat. I didn't want to eat. I quite frankly, after the race, I couldn't eat. And mainly that was due, I think a portion of it was due just the impact that the stress impact the race had on my body, but also at mile 80, my stomach turned. I didn't eat for the final 20 miles of the race. Like, didn't eat one piece of food, nothing.
Wow.
Just electrolytes. And even I had to stop drinking electrolyte mix at mile 88
At Mayfield.
and Mayqueen.
Or Mayqueen.
Yeah, and I just went with coconut water in my hand and a water bottle, and I didn't even finish the coconut water. I couldn't drink it. My stomach was like, it was like someone literally had my stomach in their hand and was just squeezing it. Like every time I would drink, it was like someone was just doing this. And like my whole torso was just like contorting at the last 12 miles. I would stop, I would dry heave. Like it was awful. And then after the race, it took me like 3 or 4 days to actually eat like real food. And we tried to eat bagels the day after the race, no go, like maybe took a bite. But that was the biggest thing. Like my body was almost like in shock. Didn't sleep. I mean, it was like for that first week, it was rough. And then about a month, it wasn't until about a month post-race where I woke up feeling like I had vibrancy and a little bit of edge to go out and like hit the day with everything I got.
Yeah.
It was just sort of like I was up, but I was like, I could either go and do something or I could sit here on the couch all day if I wanted to.
Right.
Right. And it's really hard for me to put words around it because like you said, with your stomach and the dullness in your stomach right now, it's different than an ankle where it's like that hurts.
It's not that.
It's not that.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to describe to people that haven't felt this way, but it has been the number one thing I discuss with people that are like, how'd you feel after the race? It's like a hangover, but 24/7.
Mm-hmm.
Like you've been out drinking all night, you got 3 hours of sleep, and how you feel at noon the next day, not even at 6, but at noon after you've gotten up, gotten some stuff in your stomach, and now you're just tired.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it felt 24/7 for about a month.
Yeah, that's a great example of it.
Yeah.
It's not like the vicious headache from a hangover, but
No.
it's like once you get over the first burn of the hangover and then you're just dull.
Yes.
It's that feeling for an extended period
For
of time.
sure.
And the whole experience, like more so pre-Leadville, like those 6 weeks where I was really sick, it gave me a really eye-opening, enlightening, empathetic perspective for people with chronic illness. Because a lot of like my gut reaction when I've seen, maybe just because of some of the quote unquote chronically ill people that I know, I'm like, could solve this chronic illness that you're dealing with. And then I went through something that I wouldn't say was a chronic illness, but a long-term battle with something. And I was like, nothing's fixing this. Like, I'm just 4 out of 10 every day.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it.
And you can't really empathize with those people. At least I couldn't empathize with those people until I had had something like that.
Yeah. I mean, what a powerful takeaway. In so many ways, all the stories that I've heard from Leadville, from all my friends that have done it, we all have a different experience on that day, but we all have a similar experience on that day in some ways too. Sure. It may not be the hardest thing that anyone can do. It's at the top, certainly, but it is one of the most unique experiences that I think somebody can go and put themselves through. There's something that will happen to each one of us. Like it could be that takeaway in the process of leading up to it. It could be anything, but there's no doubt that you're going to walk away from that race or the process of getting ready for that race changed at some level in some way, whether that's an added perspective and respect for other people that run ultras all the time, whether it's something like you experiencing a taste of what chronic illness feels like and getting new perspective on those people. Maybe it's tapping into an area of like your mental and emotional state that you haven't been able to unlock in your daily life through doing routine exercise or work. Whatever it is, like anybody that's on the fence of doing the activity, I'm like, you have to go. Yeah. It's that unique of an experience, I think, to go through, that if you're considering it at all, you have to honor yourself and go and do it. Because regardless of the time that you came away with, the story that we're not even talking about the time that we finished. We haven't been talking here for 30, 45 minutes. That's not what's important. What's important are all of these other things. And not that we're going to go use them in some like life or world changing way, but it's the richness of the experience that is the takeaway. Mm-hmm. And it is as rich and diverse of an experience as anyone can get doing anything in my experience, like in my perspective.
Yeah, I think that also applies, like maybe running's not your thing, but I think that also applies for crewing. The amount of impact that a race like that has on crews is unbelievable.
The whole reason I decided to run this year was crewing it.
My sister's in the same boat right now. She's like death gripped by ultra running now after being part of that crew. She just can't stop thinking about it, because once you crew for someone and you go through that, like, I assume it's probably something similar to like trauma bonding in war. Like, you guys all have one mission and it's fucking freezing cold. Everyone's starving. No one's slept. And you're all like in a pit of despair, but somehow thriving and going forward and continuing to work hard to achieve a mission despite the crazy circumstances that you've put yourself under. And it can be extremely impactful for the crew and the runner.
Yeah, I agree. And there's a connection that you walk away from something like that with the people that are there. That's also, I think, is super unique. And I've witnessed it and experienced it with Joey's crew from 2 years ago, because some of those guys have become super close friends. And in some of those guys, it was the first weekend ever I had met them. So the speed of trust and relationship that comes over a 24-hour period because you've done that is like pretty phenomenal to watch real time. You could take two complete strangers, put them in that situation with minimal knowledge about one another, with a collective goal, as you said, to get someone across the finish line. And if you're successful in doing that, the bond that you walk away from, it's like forever. It's like set in stone forever type bond, which I think is, I don't know what that says about the way to connect bonds in the real world, but like it is one of the most underrated components about being a part of a day like that I think more people should also go and experience. If you're not going to be a runner and you have friends that are going to do that and they ask you to crew, you should absolutely go and crew them.
Yeah, love them or not, Goggins has a saying, which it's something to the effect of, 100-miler is the same as living 6 years. Yep. And it's like, it's so true. Once you live one, you're like, you know, when I think about like a 6-year period of my life, let's say from 14 to 20, it's like, man, I did a lot of like football and hanging out with friends and playing sports and fishing, but like I packed almost as much life into that 24 hours as I did those however many years. Like, it's so vivid in your mind.
Isn't it wild how vivid? I mean, I can take myself back to so many parts of that.
Let's do an exercise. I'll take you from spot to spot. You tell me a phrase. So start with the start line, 4 a.m. to May Queen. What, those first 11, 12 miles, one phrase.
Panic. So let me tell you. So, and you probably know this, but for 2 years, all I've been hearing from people that have either run the race, coached the race, been a part of the environment, don't go out hot. Okay. Because as you witnessed, like the first 4 or 5 miles are downhill. Don't go out, blow up your legs, run faster than you need to, conserve. Like Don, I think, said something to the effect of, if you win the Leadville half marathon, it doesn't do well for the 100. Meaning that if you're in first place after that first 12 miles, it is usually going to be a problem. Sure. So go out conservative. What happened that morning on my watch was my heart rate was jumping all over the place. So I was running at an effort that I thought was squarely in my aerobic zone, but my heart rate was reading 167, 187, 172, 155. And so, like, there's so much going on in your head at the beginning of that race. There's people around you. It's just an environment that I'd never been a part of. You're running on low sleep to begin with. It's 4 a.m. So when that starts happening, immediately my head starts going, fuck, dude, first 2 miles in, my average heart rate's 165. This is not good. 3 miles in, my average heart rate's 167. Like, this is not good. And then there was some realization that I had as we got through those first 4 or 5 miles and started to go around Turquoise Lake.
Yeah, there's beautiful trails there.
Unbelievable. And it's one of the most special like visuals of the entire race is seeing the headlamps around Turquoise Lake at the beginning. And Don was like, you have to look back and see it. And I was able to. And there were a couple of drone shots that people got on video. It is unbelievable to see the sun coming up and to see those headlamps moving. And so you're in the single file line on pretty much a single track around Turquoise Lake. And I just said, fuck it. I'm taking off my tech. So I reached under my vest and I took off my heart rate monitor and I stuffed it in my vest and I took off my watch and I held it. And I just started running with my breath. And this goes back to preparation and trust in yourself.
Yeah.
Because had I not prepared at the level that I had and at the starting line said 2 words in my head, patience. Patience was a word I kept reiterating to myself the entire race. And then trust. Trust the work that you've put in. I would have completely blown myself up in those first 12 miles mentally.
Yeah.
But I just told myself, run with your breath. You've been here before. You've seen virtually every mile of this trail that you're going to run today. Patience. Don't worry about anybody else around you. Just run. And I got to the first May Queen aid station about 5 minutes ahead of my 23-hour pace. And I was completely calmed down by that first 12 miles. But in the middle section, dude, I was like on the brink of panicking based on what people had told me about that section, where my heart rate was, and worried that I was going to overdo it in the first 12 miles of the race and not give myself a chance to either finish the way I wanted to.
Yeah. It's interesting me sitting here because I would have just been like, dude, you're fine. Like after I knew how fit you were. I had seen your training. I would like, but when it's yourself, and you don't have anyone to bounce the ideas off of, and it's just like ringing between your ears, you're like, fuck, did I mess this up? Like, what's going on? Do I have an arrhythmia? Like, is this altitude harder than I thought it was going to be?
Right.
Did I do something weird last night? Like, was that pasta from the place? Like, I don't know. So there's all those little things. Okay, that's 0 to 1. 1 to 2, Mayfield to Outward Bound. What phrase or word comes to mind when you think about it?
Fun. Fucking fun. Yeah. When I climbed up out of May Queen and hit that dirt road.
That Sugarloaf
Yep.
climb.
And started to do Sugarloaf Pass, that first initial climb. My heart rate was calmed down and I was feeling so good. And then I was just passing people.
That's the best part of the
on the
morning
climb.
too, because it wasn't hot yet.
No, it was so good.
So nice out.
And then I started to come down into Outward Bound.
Like power line.
Yeah.
and that road.
I'm running with this guy on power line. I'm flowing. And I called Joey, and my energy was just so good at that point. And I shaved off, on my 23-hour time, I think I shaved off 20 minutes. And I rolled in there, and I felt fantastic. My son was there. My wife was there. And I was just having so much fun. That's when the fun really, really started to kick in for me. Where it was like nervous anxiousness, a little bit of panic, got to May Queen, got situated, and then starting to feel, it's like feeling an engine in your car. When you're starting to break it in, you're like, oh, okay, like I can play with this a little bit. It was the first time that I had felt completely in control of the vehicle, which was my body and my physicality and my fitness, and how fun that was. There wasn't a piece of me that was pushing. There wasn't a piece of me that was anxious, but I wasn't taking it too easy. It was just like complete flow. Mm-hmm. And that was really fun. And then when I saw Don at Outward Bound, I told him, I was like, look, my heart rate, you haven't seen me all morning, but my heart rate was doing this. So I'm telling you right now, my tech is off. I'm not monitoring my heart rate. I know we had talked about, because we had made promises about where my average heart rate was going to be when I came into Twin Lakes. When I came back from Hope Pass to Twin Lakes, where he wanted to range me, I said, we're not going to do that today. And he was like, cool.
And I heard David Roche talk about this, the guy that set the course record.
Yeah.
So people that don't know, this year at Leadville. And
Recommend for people that don't know, go follow him. He's super refreshing to follow, but also has a lot of really pragmatic information about how he prepared for the race, how he ran the race real time. It's a really good follow.
He's a running nerd. That's the way to that's the way I think. And it's not like, but it's relatable. And
for sure.
one thing he said about heart rate that I thought was interesting was he said I wore heart rate gear to allow myself to run faster, which I thought was interesting because he's like, I know that I can hammer in zone 3 uphill, and he's like, and that's totally safe. Like the amount of,
That's interesting.
the amount of glucose he was taking in, he was like, I was looking down at my watch, which he just had, the only number he had was his heart rate. He set the screen to just be heart rate, and he'd look down, and if he was under it, he'd be like, oh, I can go faster. It wasn't like, let me keep under this number. Now, you and I aren't David Roche. Unfortunately, we're not the fastest people to ever step foot and toe the line at Leadville. So I think it's a little different. I think his heart rate stays a little lower than ours does.
Of course.
But I thought that was an interesting perspective because usually when people think about heart rate, it's like, I'm trying to stay in this zone. I'm trying to stay down. I'm trying to stay controlled. His was like, no, this is giving me freedom to run faster.
I think it's a really powerful point. Yeah.
And I think there is something to that. I didn't wear any heart rate shit. I literally just ran off field the entire time, like you're saying. I just was so happy. I didn't pace anything. I ran the beginning, first 9 miles. The only pacing I had was like, I knew a lot of people in this race, like 10 other people. And I'm like, oh, this is like where I fit in roughly. I'm like, I should be behind Ty. I should be back with like Mitchell and Matt Choi. I'm like, that's where I should be. And I was, and then I had crazy diarrhea. So got that problem fixed. And then after that, I ran, I think it was, so I knew I wasn't fit because I hadn't been running. And so I was like, my fitness isn't good, so I can't handle anybody on an uphill, because if I tried to stay with them on an uphill, my heart rate's going to skyrocket. My perceived effort's going to skyrocket because I don't have the cardiovascular fitness. You have to run for months to develop that. But I'm like, what I do have is dexterity and a lot of experience. So I'm just going to hammer downhills and grit. I have a lot of grit. That's probably your superpower is following instruction and sticking to something. Mine is grit. Like I can show up to a 100-mile race any day of the year and finish it. If I'm in shape, if I'm not, I can run 100 miles. The way I thought about it was like, I'm not fit, so I can't go fast uphill. I'm going to hammer downhills. And that downhill on Sugarloaf, I think I ran a 21-minute 5K down into
Wow.
Yeah.
So you were flying.
Yeah, I was running like 720. Averaging 720. So I got down to like 550 going downhill. And I was just hammering downhill because I'm like, I'm not fast enough to hang with anybody. And then I would get on the flats, like the roads right after Outward Bound. Everyone would go past me because, like, for me, I wasn't able to run fast unless gravity was doing the work. I was so unfit that's where I found myself.
Yeah.
How did you feel? Because after Outward Bound, you basically have this like long flat section until you get to see everybody again at Twin Lakes. I really liked that long flat section just for like great. Mental peace.
So for me, it was important because I was able to run. Don and I met up for Eric Hinman's birthday the week ahead of Leadville.
Yeah.
So I went to Salida with Eric, and they all rode mountain bikes along the Continental Divide. And that day I met Don in Leadville, and we ran Mount Sherman.
Okay.
And that was a really also critical piece of learning for me, because running with Don allowed me to learn from him where he runs and where he walks. Mm-hmm. So there were certain pitches of road where I would have run that he said, you're not gaining much from that, walk it. And that flat section going up, especially when you get to half pipe after that long flat road, and now it starts to become like a little bit more like this and a couple more uphills, I would walk some of those sections, and then I would run, and I would walk, and I would run. And there'd be certain times where guys would pass me, but then I'd catch them. Yeah. And then about 5 miles out from Twin Lakes, I kind of passed everybody that was in my little group and left them behind because of the way I handled those rolling hills. Yeah. And the confidence that built going to Twin Lakes, because I hadn't burnt a lot of energy, I felt almost as fresh 8 miles into that section as I did when I got into Outward Bound. I felt like I didn't use very much energy at all.
You're talking about the dirt road section?
Correct. So
Yeah.
I'm talking about like the paved road coming out of Outward Bound. Yep. Then you get to the dirt road section that's still pretty flat, and then you make that right. And on that right, those climbs start to get a little bit steeper, and now you're working your way up around the bottom of the.
And you're kind of like on the side of the mountain.
Correct.
Yeah, I walked about half that too.
Yeah. So when I started to do that, and I felt like my energy level was about the same as it was at Outward Bound, I got really confident. And then I ran with great pace coming down to Twin Lakes, and I had shaved about an hour off my 23-hour.
What were your feelings coming into Twin Lakes? What was going through your head?
I was vibing so much. You know, there's this song by Zerb that I played called Milwaukee, and I played it for the entire race straight. And I told them when I come into Twin Lakes, I want that blasting on a speaker. So
You played it the whole time you raced?
yeah, 100% of the time. Didn't listen to another song. It has like, I think it's like East African but some sort of tribal words. Yeah, but no real words. And it was just like put me in a trance. I just ran with it the whole time. It was so awesome.
Very Eric Hinman.
It is, and that's who I stole it from. Yeah. I decided to give it a try for the 50, and I played Push-Ups by Drake, and that worked for the 50 when things got dark. But this was like different because it was almost like an instrumental because of the words. So I truly was not thinking about anything that was going on because I didn't know the words. I was just really following the music. So anyway, my son and wife met me with a speaker as I ran into Twin Lakes. And the feeling that I was having is like, I'm a pretty good climber, even for my size, because of my leg strength. So when I was at 22 hours coming into Twin Lakes, I was like, I remember telling the group, I was like, I'm not supposed to be here now and be this fresh. And that's when I really started to get excited, because the climb is where I can catch people, and I was already ahead of where I thought I was going to be, and I was fired up about that. And I was like, I'm not supposed to be here now, but I'm here, and I got the best section. Right. I wanted Hope Pass. Like, that's a comfort zone for me. Right. Because I'm not built like a road racer runner. Yeah. I was like, this is great for me.
Especially the front side. It's such a nice change of pace. It's
great.
It's gorgeous. You get to stop running. There's like, maybe 3 sections you run the whole front side, and it's like, I'm just power hiking this. My heart rate's pretty low. I'm just like not taking any damage. I'm going uphill. It's great.
It was great. And so when I was cranking, I was passing people on the hill. And then my stoke was just getting higher and higher and higher, but not at a place where I was overdoing it. But I was just so excited about the race that I was starting to put together. And then I crossed over the top of Hope Pass, took a couple pictures of myself, and then was coming down the backside, and that's when David Roche was coming up. When I saw David Roche, like, no bullshit, Ryan, I was like, this guy is just like a lifetime worker, because I was expecting to see Adrian.
Yeah, and he was in second, because I was at the aid station just on the other side when I saw David, and I was like, oh, who is that? Because for people that don't know, Adrian McDonald has won maybe 2 other times, and he was definitely up there as a favorite. And
Correct.
trying
to set the course record too.
I expected he would, and he either beat the course record,
I think he did,
or was within 4 minutes of it.
Yeah.
And when I saw David Roche, I was like, who is that guy? Because I didn't know who he was before that.
No, and he didn't even look like he was sweating when I saw him.
Yeah, and he had gapped him. Like, by the time they had got to Hope's Pass, like, I remember looking down at my watch. I'm like, okay, there's the first guy passing on the way back, because it's an out and back. I'm like, the next guy should be here within 5 to 6 minutes, because they still have 50 miles to run. The gap can't be that big yet. And I didn't see Adrian for another, I don't know, it must have been 10 minutes.
Yeah, so they were, that's how I felt coming down. So I was like, wow. And I was confused, because I was like, was that guy part of the race? Was he down there, like, helping the aid station at Winfield? Like, what? Because I see Adrian, but I don't know that guy. So anyway, I was like, whatever. So then I started to pass some of the leaders coming up. And one of the guys that, like, I really, really respect, I won't mention him here, but, like, he's a well-known ultra runner and someone that I had in mind as like would be a stretch goal to stay with him. And as I came down Hope Pass, got to the bottom and started to run the 4 mile out to Winfield, I saw him. And it's the first time I saw him from between the start of the race and this point. And again, going back to the...
Can I guess?
Sure.
Robbie Ballinger. Yeah. Yay! I got it.
And I have so much respect for him. And he's just a complete savage. And he was running a great race. But then I was like, okay, like we can really do something.
Yeah. Like I'm hanging out with the big kids.
Yeah, we can really do something today. For whatever reason, it's just like this cumulation of my fitness, the day that I'm having, my nutrition staying with me.
Dude, it was in your fucking training, dude. Yeah. I have known so many people who have gone to run their first ultra. I've never seen someone be as consistent with training as you. I'm not blowing smoke up your horn because you're on the podcast. I've never seen someone log miles from 0 to 70 as consistent as you were leading up to that race. Yeah. And I told everyone, like, we were at the Airbnb beforehand. Everyone's talking about, like, how do you think so-and-so will do? I'm like, I don't know, but Ty's going to smash. I'm like, I guarantee you, wait till tomorrow, Ty is going to smash. The work he put in is so far above and beyond. And everyone's like, oh, well, everyone else is doing lead, man. I'm like, trust me. I watched this guy's miles.
That, dude. I'll take that compliment.
You had a training block that was legit. It was a legit training block.
Yeah. That, and I think that you're right. It had a lot to do with it. And when I got up to Robbie, I just tried to stay on him the entire way back up Hope. And that was my motivation. And then when I came into Twin Lakes, I was like, the word I would use there is surprised. Because I thought I'd be more mangled. And I wasn't. And one of the things that I try to be cognizant of, and maybe this was a mindset thing, honestly, Ryan, like, I wanted my crew. I wanted to give my crew energy. I didn't want my crew to give me energy. Right. I wanted them to know how thankful I was to have them. And I wanted to give them positive energy to know that the guy that they're there supporting is going to run a really good race, and to be so engaged in helping me do that. And the only way that I knew how was just not to be negative when I showed up there, and to be overly positive. Right. And thankful, and thanking each individual, and spending time making eye contact and like, how you doing? What's up? Like, we're having fun, aren't we? Like, play that music louder. Like, I wanted to will my team into a mindset that I think some people don't have, that I witness other people not have when they come in, which caused the trickle-down effect with their crew to start worrying, start questioning what's going on out in the course, start switching things that they probably didn't need to switch to try to help their runner. Yeah. And I didn't want to do that. So when I came into Twin Lakes, the inbound, number one, I was surprised. And number two, I said, I'm picking out my pacers, and I want to give them energy. Yeah. I want them to feel excited about what we're going to do over the next 38 miles together. Now, there became a point where I had no more energy to give, and they had to step in as pacers do, as crew does. But I think that's a really important takeaway for people that are running ultras, is like, make that decision at the starting line and how you're going to show up for the pacers that are there supporting you, no matter how you feel, because it comes back to repay you throughout the way. It's like this cycle of energy within our crowd. No one had more fun at their aid stations than our crew did. Yeah. And I wanted to make that a point.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way too. And I don't know if it's like a bit of it is a guilty conscience. Like, I'm not worthy of these people coming and spending their time and doing all this shit for me. So I'm like, I just want them to have a party. Like, I want them to have like the best time ever. And I agree. I think my team was incredible. And I remember my sister saying, so at the first time we saw them, I came in so happy and I was in and out pretty quick. And then the second time I saw them, I I was asking all of them, like, how are you guys doing? Like, what's going on? You guys got enough food and water? You guys got enough supplies for what you need? She's like, honestly, we're just stoked because you're the happiest kid in the race. And she's like, that's what makes it fun, because our runner is like the happiest. And I was like, well, now I'm
It's so powerful.
yeah. If you, it flows both ways. Like you were saying, it's like, if you're sappy during the ultra, everyone's hurting. Everyone fucking hurts. You can still say thank you. You can still, like, you know, have a decent mindset and, you know, remember that you signed up to be an absolute psychopath. Like, you got to keep it all in perspective. And I know it's like sometimes you might be irritable because you haven't eaten or you're tired or whatever, and that stuff's all good. Like, your people understand what state you're in. But as much as you can control it, I feel like I at least owe it to my crew to be a fun runner to pace. I want to be someone, like, next time I ask them, people are like, fuck yeah, that was dope last time we did that. I want to pace Ryan again, or I want to be in Ryan's crew again. Like, you want people to be excited about that.
One of the most impactful things my dad used to tell me as a kid at playing basketball is no one cares how you act when things are going your way. How are you acting when things aren't going your way?
Yeah.
And when you're a kid, what that means is, like, not throwing a temper tantrum when you don't get what you want. That's how it begins when you're a kid. But the importance of learning that lesson, and you need to be reminded over time, because no one's perfect, is that when you're an adult, it's how you're showing up to lead others in situations that are very hard. And that becomes like a really important foundational skill. If you can be like a rock of stability, and not even just stability, but if you can add positivity and levity to really bad situations in the moment, that's a superpower if you can cultivate it. And that's what I wanted to be for the team as we made our way through this thing, as much as I possibly could. When I saw that energy to give, was like, I'm going to be the energy. I want them to look around. I want other aid stations to look around and be like, that crew, that runner, like, they're having the time of their life.
Hell yeah.
And that's what this race is all about. And I wanted my team to feel proud that they were supporting me, not wishing that, oh, fuck, man, I wish I didn't come out here on a Saturday. You know, this isn't like, I don't want this guy screaming at me. Like, he's kind of being a dick. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like, I was scared of that. And so I tried to make the decision at the very beginning, which was like, you're not going to be that guy. You're going to bring more positivity. And so when I came in surprised at Twin Lakes, I was like, Diaz, I hope you got your track spikes on. I called Joey from the mountain. I was like, tell Diaz to put his track spikes on. We're running. And Diaz, like, they were funny. They were saying Diaz was warming up. He was getting all nervous because Don, when we first had our call a week ahead of the race, he was like, he may drop you guys. Like, I'm fully expecting him to have gas at 62. So be ready to run.
Yeah.
And
Cool place to be.
yeah, and what I loved about it is it made the guys that I run with take it really seriously.
For sure.
So Diaz showed up in really good shape, and he ran well with me through that next segment until my stomach flipped.
Tell me about the darkest part.
So when I got to the half pipe aid station, I had noodles and Coke. 45 seconds max after I had the noodles and Coke, I knew it was a mistake. Whatever had happened, the cocktail of nutrition that I had in my stomach at that time did not mix well with the noodles and Coke. Noodles and Coke, to your point about nutrition and testing them on, like, shorter runs, I had never had an issue. Even in the 50, of drinking Coke and eating the ramen. Mm-hmm. Never had an issue. But that day at mile 76, with everything I had done to my body and the nutrition I had, it was a fucking issue. Yeah. And my stomach started to cramp as I was running. And the pace that we were running, I had to run from there into Outward Bound. And when I got into Outward Bound, I was running a 21-hour, 45-minute race time. And I looked at him, I was like, I can't eat. And Diaz was like, yeah, he can't eat. So I was like, we just need to start moving because I'm going to need more time. Like, I'm not going to hang out at this aid station. I'm going to need the time. And Brock and I walked up until the base of Power Line.
That climb the second time is fucking brutal.
And, dude, I'll tell you, that climb and Power Line, when I had no nutrition in my stomach for like 8 miles, it went on forever, dude. I was in just the pain cave. The false summits on that, That was the section I paced Joey at last year. I knew it was coming, and it still, the 1 hour hike or hour and a half hike felt like 5 hours.
Yeah, lifetimes.
It just felt so long, and my stomach, that's when the dry heaving started, where my stomach was like, every time I would drink, my stomach would go like this, or my abdomen would go like this, and then I would start dry heaving, trying to get stuff up, but it wasn't coming up, which was even more annoying. And then I tried to like refill with 7-Up at the top of Space Camp.
The psychedelic party.
Oh my God.
That was crazy up there.
Yeah, to paint the picture for like the crowd that doesn't know about Space Camp or this section of Leadville, is they have this commune of people that is unsanctioned by Lifetime or by Leadville. These people that drive up to the top of Sugarloaf Pass and camp out with their campers, and they create this super psychedelic, like out of this world inflatable alien.
It looks like electric forest.
Correct.
Like you feel very weird that you're not on acid. You're like, what is this?
Dude. And everybody there is probably on, I mean, name your substance. It's probably
All of them.
they're partying.
They had bottles of whiskey on the aid station table. So it's like ultra snacks. And then like, they're like, do you want whiskey? I'm like, no.
Yeah.
It sounds terrible.
Yeah. It's a pretty trippy position to be in, especially as you're starting to go into the pain cave. But I tried to like get some nutrition down there, and that was the last moment that I drank anything but coconut water and water, or ate. And we tried to walk on the way down, but I basically walked it into May Queen, and then from there I just looked at Joey and I was like, "We can try to run, but I'm gonna have to walk." Most of it. We ran the first 2 of the 12 miles for the last segment. And I would say at mile 95, I like wanted to cry. I like wanted to sit down on a rock and just cry. Because the miles at that point were like, it was taking me 20 minutes to fucking walk these miles, you know? So there was a part of me that was like, you had made it this far and you ran the race of your life, and now number one is kind of falling away. But even worse than that, it was like the mental turmoil of knowing there was 2 hours of walking left. For 6 miles, it's going to take me 2 hours. I was like, I was just done. And I just wanted to like, dude, I'm like starting to get emotional now. I just wanted to fucking cry.
And you can't put yourself there until you realize how hard each step was.
Yeah.
So 2 hours, you're like, oh, well, it's just 2 hours. Yeah, but this next fucking step I'm about to do with my left foot feels like it's going to be my last.
Yeah, for sure.
And I have to do 20,000 more of those.
Yeah.
Uphill.
Yeah.
Just to finish.
Correct. And then you start to see people pass you and pass you and pass you and pass you and pass you. And when you're a competitor and that's happening, I don't care who you are, you're just like, fuck. Every time. I'm just looking back and I'm like waiting for another headlamp to come around the corner that I know is going to pass me. And it just was hard on so many levels. Emotionally, it was hard. Mentally, it was hard. And then I was just like, I went from, you could still get 22 to like, oh, you got sure thing, you're sub 23. And then it was like, dude, you need to hang on to go sub 24. And to watch that unravel, it still ended up being an amazing race. But it was like you. I looked at Diaz at mile 76 and I was like, I have no business feeling this good. And when I said that, I was like, I know the pain is coming. I just don't know when. And then it came then. And I had the whole rainbow of experiences emotionally, mentally. And I think looking back on it, when people ask me what the most exceptional part of the race was, it was that moment. Because it's like the vivid, like I can touch the sand on Turquoise Lake when I was on my hands and knees dry heaving. Like right now I can feel it, what it feels like to feel that alive is something that you, unless you put yourself in that position, you almost never get to feel. You almost have to be like on psychedelics or have like some sort of spiritual experience to be able to like feel the grains of sand in your fingers and have that memory so ingrained in my head. like it was yesterday, you could take me back. And it was because of the pain and the hardship that I was going through and like what I had to tap into to get through that moment. And that's why I said 15, 20 minutes ago, whenever I said, it's like anybody that is on the fence about doing these races, you don't hope for that, but that's what you walk away with it from it. That's the richness of the experience. But it's only tapped into by going to like that super fucked up dark place. Because the first 76 miles, they're vivid, yes, but they're not as vivid. Like that's 4 or 5 times as vivid as the first 76 miles.
Yeah.
I don't know if you agree with that, but it sounds like from your description of how you felt on that last 10-mile segment, it's very similar in terms of how your body was reacting and what you had to tap into to just get through those next 7 miles. Well, why don't you talk a little bit about your experience?
Yeah, sure. I have I've touched on it a little bit in various places, but yeah, great race until great race given where my fitness was. Like waking up at 4 a.m., I was like, this is a 50-50 that I'm gonna DNF this. You know, that's where my stomach is. Like the odds of being able to eat enough calories, given that I was 168 pounds, seemed really unlikely that I was going to be able to eat enough to run 100 miles. So for the race to go as well as it did was really exciting. And it got hard, you know, around 80, but then 88, that last aid station, they're like, to go sub 24 or sub 25, you just got to run these out at 11-minute pace. And I'm like, okay, I feel decent. Had very little food, but I was like, I can gut out these last 11 miles. And to my surprise, Osborne and I started walking. And then he's like, let's, you know, because it's kind of like pavement right there.
Yep.
I'm a trail runner. I got smoked on the roads the entire race. Anytime we touch road, I'd just get passed by everybody. But then the trails, I would smoke everyone. That is what I'm good at. And we got on the trails, and I was running like 10 minutes on the flats and like maybe 12-minute running uphill. And we ran the first, I'm trying to remember what it was, until 94 or something. And then the same way that you would turn your camera, like if you wanted wide versus, you know, a tall picture, my vision flipped 90 degrees to the left, and I took 3 consecutive steps. My body just veered off the trail, and I was like, that was weird. And I stood up, and my body just kept leaning left, and I didn't know it, but I was like dumping blood out of my stomach. So at that point, I was like, well, you know, everything just fell apart right in front of me. I went from like, oh, we're going to run this out, I'm going to have a great finish and finish sub 25, 24. It was going to be like 24 and change, which is cool with where I started the day, to I'm not sure if I'm going to live through this really quickly. I didn't know I was bleeding in my stomach. We walked it out through those trails, and every next step was like, one step felt as hard as like a full daily morning workout, like a full CrossFit workout. Each step was that laborious, where I was like, I don't know if I can do this next one. Boom. And I would step. I'd be like, holy shit, that was hard. Let's see if I can do another. Boom. And it was like, I would just keep falling to my knees and just, I just looked at David and I was like, something's wrong. And I was like, I've done a lot of hard shit in my life. I've ran 100-milers. I've done fucking 300, 500-mile trips. Like, something is wrong. And he gave me no sympathy. And there's a big switch around. 3 different people were supposed to be my last leg, but because of injuries and different things, it became Osborne was going to do half of it, and then he was going to do the whole thing. And I think anybody else would have called it. He was just like, he's seen me do some hard stuff. And we had just done the Teton picnic together that I did with my stomach thing. And he saw me battle through like some impossible shit. And he was like, you know, he trusted my will, even though I was looking for a way out. Right. But yeah, we eventually just walked. And then Nicole ended up switching in as my pacer, 'cause I just needed like positivity at that point. And then, I literally just walked all the way. You know, I ran the last 20 meters to the finish line, but you know, like you're saying, the time's ticking off. But at that point, I just kept saying this Mac Miller line. It was like, I'm so tired of being so tired. And that's all I could think in my head. I was just like, I'm so tired of feeling this way. Not the last 2 hours, but the last 2 months. And I was like, yeah, it was the limit. I found my limit that day for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you kind of bundled that up well. If you find you at your limit in these races, it's done its job.
Yeah.
Like you said, you hope you don't have internal bleeding and Giardia and all the things that you had to go through. But I think at the end of the day, if you get to the finish line and you have stuff in the tank, you've kind of done yourself a disservice from the experience, in my opinion.
And here's what I will say. People will be like, oh, that's, people on the internet have their opinions about how you live your life regardless. People will say, oh, you should have pulled the plug at 93. And I'm like, maybe. But that would have fucking sucked. I'd be sitting in here right now as a non-Leadville finisher. So despite it being a semi-dangerous thing, I think it was the right move. All in all, in terms of everything I think about my life, I'm stoked that I finished that race. Afterwards, we came back. We saw some things in my stool. And actually just texted Osborne. I was like, this is what happened, because he had gone home. And then he kind of sounded the alarm. And everyone was like, well, if he says that he's worried about you, you're going to the hospital. And I was like, all right, I'll go. But we're stopping and we're getting Dairy Queen on the way. I got myself a Blizzard on the way to the hospital.
Yeah, I would have if I could have eaten. But what an experience, man. And I'm so happy for you that you rocked it and you killed it.
I'm stoked for you, dude. You showed what was possible for a non-runner, quote unquote, like a good athlete can get to in a 9-month period. You can become a legit ultra runner running with some of the best people in the world if you have what I do believe after this conversation is your superpower, which is set it and forget it. Yep. You have set it and forget it. You have, I'm running Leadville and I'm doing everything in my power these next 9 months to be the best person on start line. Yep. That's your superpower. And if there's people listening to this that have that ability to just set it and forget it as it's written, you can do this. It's just about deciding.
That's the message, man. And I think that the huge takeaway is the richness of, you don't want to get too philosophical with it, but truly like the richness that lives on the other side of being able to do that. There's ordinary things like running a process and staying committed, which in and of themselves are not like extra special, but they can unlock so many extra special things if you're just willing to do that.
Because you still got to show up on race day. Correct. And you still got to have the race of your life.
Correct.
You could have had that amazing process leading up to it, and that gets you the possibility.
But that's all you want.
Right.
That's all you want is the possibility. Without that, the possibility is never there. But if you can unlock that upside with doing ordinary things, there's really no excuse, and there's just so much life to be lived. And I think if there's one person that I know, it's you, in your ability to try to experience those unbelievable things that life has to offer that can't come through money, that can't come through anything but time commitment and an ability to stretch what you're comfortable with. You're like the poster child for that.
Oh, thank you.
For sure. And I respect it so much and actually am jealous in so many ways of what you do. But it's such a fantastic example. I think for anybody listening to this, like, I don't think you would pass yourself off as special either. I think your approach to it is just consistent and you're committed to it because you care. And what that unlocks with what you've been able to do in your life is just unbelievable when you look back on it. So that's the takeaway. That's the takeaway from Leadville. You can do it if you want to do it. It doesn't take ultra special things, just takes commitment. And the experience can be life-changing on the other end.
What's next?
You know, it's interesting you asked that. It's hard. The gift of Leadville is that the experience is so exceptional. The downside of Leadville is that the experience is so exceptional.
Yeah.
And so what you have to be careful of is you just don't keep like trying to one up. I call it like two cookies. It's like when you meet somebody and you tell them about your experience and they go, yeah, I had that experience and my experience had this. I ran it with David Goggins. It's like, okay, dude, but like I was talking about my experience. I call those people two cookie people.
Two cookie people. Okay.
It's like,
I know these people.
Yes. It's like you tell your story and they tell their story, but it's a better version of your story. Yeah. Right? So with Leadville, I don't want to be like someone that's chasing the two cookies, like doing another better version of Leadville. I want to give it its place. But I haven't really gotten fired up in the same way that I have about Leadville for other things. You know, I've talked to Don about running a sub-3 marathon. I think that would be an interesting box to check off in a different type of athletic feat related to speed and endurance at a higher threshold heart rate. So I think that'd be interesting. You know, high rocks is something that I would think would have fun doing. How much, and you've done in the past, so maybe you could sway me, but it's like, how much do I want to commit at doing that really well? And for me in my life right now with my kids and my work and my wife, every hour is so valuable. It's either valued monetarily or it's value from like a family unit fulfillment standpoint. And I was talking to Israel Palacio, who we're friends with, about this last night. And every decision now is so critical if I'm going to sacrifice time with them and do something else. And with Leadville, I so wanted to do it. It wasn't even a question that I was able to justify the hours that I was spending doing it. And I was okay with that trade-off. But at this point, if I'm not able to give that type of attention to something, commitment, energy, and be happy about giving that type of commitment and energy, then it's not worth the hour that I'm spending, right? Yeah. So I want to find something next that I'm going to pursue that if I do, the sacrifice is worth it. Yeah. Does that make sense?
I like that. A football coach I had, he wrestled D1 and played football D1. Yeah. And we asked him, we said, Coach, tell us straight. You played 2 D1 sports. Did you ever party in college? And his answer, he used to do this thing. To pump us up at halftime, he would punch through a locker. And he's like 6'5", 300 pounds. We're like, Coach, did you ever party in college with all that sports and academics? And he looked at us with a smirk and he said, I don't half-ass anything.
I love that, dude.
And
yeah,
I feel like you're one of those guys. You just anything you're gonna do, you're gonna fucking do it with veracity, and you're not gonna half-ass training for something. Like if you're training for something, you are gonna be the individual that goes above and beyond. Up at 4:30 a.m. running 25 miles. Well, speaking of your time being valuable, I appreciate you coming in and having this conversation. And
you're the man. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people will get a lot out of this.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I appreciate you.
And I like the new studio. I feel comfy. It's good.
New studio's a vibe. The wallpaper's a vibe. This guy's a vibe. So I'm happy, and thank you again for having me.
All right, y'all. Till next time.
See ya.
Stay wild.